super delighted that I get to welcome friend, seminary classmate, just awesome human being, Reverend Marietta Macy, who is here. She is a Presbyterian pastor. She is the chair, a co-moderator of the Palestine Justice Network of the PCUSA Summit, formerly Israel-Palestine Mission Network, IPMN, for those of you who know that, off and on since 2013. She's led educational and solidarity delegations to Palestine and Israel, spent over a decade working in Christian education ministries for children, youth, and adults. Reverend Macy was first introduced to the subject of Palestine while serving as a youth advisory delegate for the PCUSA General Assembly in 2004 and has stayed connected ever since. A graduate of Hanover College in 2008, she earned her BA in theater, and from the wonderful Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 2014 with her Master of Divinity. Brian, Marietta, and I come from the same class. Having grown up in a farm in rural southern Indiana, she recognized a shared language of kinship with the land expressed by indigenous Palestinian farmers, which has greatly shaped her theology of creation and our place in it. So we're glad to have you. Marietta's title is Zionism, Nationalism, and Racism. What do they mean for Palestine? And we're going to delve into the historical and ongoing impacts of nationalist-fueled settler colonialism. I hope that is enough of an introduction for you all to know what we're getting ourselves into. And now I turn it over to Marietta.
Choose to be in these places. Am I on? Or do I not? No, it's not.
Is the green light on?
It's red now. That's green. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah. So it wasn't the letter this morning. It was. Don't worry. We are prepared.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is so helpful. This is amazing hospitality. I'm so glad to be here with my own former seminary classmates and joining you all. As Joanna said, my name is Reverend Marietta Macy. I'm a Presbyterian minister and currently serving as co-moderator of the Palestine Justice Network of the PCUSA. We are one of, I think, a couple dozen mission networks in the PCUSA. We're the only one that was created by a mandate of our General Assembly, which happened to be at the 2004 General Assembly that I voted on as a youth advisory delegate. So this issue has been really central to my own call to ministry and has spent a substantial amount of time in and out of Presbyterian circles and with our other ecumenical partners, who I know we have some friends here today too. Our mission, part of our mission statement is up here that you can see. If you would like more information, I do encourage you, and there's some handouts out there that I'm trying to be a good steward of the paper that's already been printed and get them out to people. These are incomplete lists. They're older resources, so there's new things that have happened. You can catch up on all that online and learn more about our network, our partners, and find a lot of resources to use also. On the table outside, some of you may have seen these different books. These are 3 of the curriculums that we have created over the years that are designed to use in congregational settings especially. So if you all are from any churches or have friend groups that would like to learn more, there are a few different ones. Steadfast Hope is our oldest one. So I will say it's all still very true and good information. But like every time I give a presentation on this, I have to update my numbers in essentially worse ways. So resources that are outdated are just are still relevant, but a little behind on their numbers in some ways. We also have one called Zionism Unsettled, which addresses Zionism specifically and helps get through a lot of the theological denseness that this issue can have. I'm going to talk about a lot today, but you could do days and days and days of presentations on each of the topics I'm going to try to touch on. One of our newest one is Why Palestine Matters. So this is the most up-to-date with statistics and numbers and things like that you may find. This one delves into the attachment to colonialism specifically, which is what I'll talk about a lot today, and gives you a look at the issue of Palestine as an intersectional justice issue. So we'll see today where a lot of these points of injustice and oppression come together in this one place. So our mandate, or one of the things that gives us guidance, is that we speak to the church, not for the church. So I am not an official PCUSA employee who is going to tell you what the policies of the church are. I will cover that. But we are the ones who are doing the educating and advocating for our denomination to take the stands that it has and to maintain our partnerships and our relationships both here in the U.S. and in Palestine and Israel with our Jewish partners, Palestinian, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Baha'i. There are all kinds of folks of all different identities that we often wash out. So our mission network keeps up those personal relationships because just like the church is connectional and we need to have that be central to our work, that's what we do on this global scale as well. So all of our work is informed by the people who are experiencing this life. We very intentionally don't dictate to what our Palestinian partners should do or tell us all what we should do for them. We ask them and we talk to them and we stay in relationship and then form these strategies together. So all of the policies that we'll get to and where our denomination has taken actions, none of that has happened in a vacuum. It's happened with deep community and theological work together. So, like I said, you could do days of talks on each one of these issues. I am going to very briefly summarize each of them and then get into what they mean for the current situation in Palestine specifically. So Zionism, to begin with, is a form of nationalism. It's Jewish nationalism. All of the citations that are in quotes on here are from the Encyclopedia Britannica, to give very basic definitions. It's a Jewish nationalist movement with the goal of creating and supporting a Jewish state. Its roots were not religious to begin with. Zionism began as a political movement and has adopted and co-opted religious language and folks who are motivated by religious means throughout its process of development. Now, the state of Israel that we know now was founded in 1948, but the support to create this particular state goes back much farther than that, and supported especially by the British and the European and Western powers. So in 1917, the Balfour Declaration was one of the first official declarations that set up support from Britain for a creation of a Jewish state. They followed that in 1922 with the creation of the British Mandate of Palestine, is what Palestine, Israel was before it became the state of Israel now. And when the British were controlling that region under the mandate, they already set up an unequal legal system that preferenced Jewish immigrants over Palestinian people who were already living in the land. So nationalism essentially takes away the diverse identities that we may have and insists that you focus your dedication, your interests, and everything on maintaining one national image. It demands political allegiance and all kinds of other things. But before the idea, nationalism, like racism and other isms, has not always existed. We know people were in their affinity groups, they identified by different things, by family, by religion, by your geography. But as we know, and some of us discussed in our Bible stories today, folks move around and they marry and they immigrate because there's no food here and you move somewhere else. So the nationalist identity came to be in the 1800s, a little before that, working on that, took away those different types of identities that people organize around. Their, city-state examples. Greece was not always Greece. They were their own individual islands, cultures, nations. We have all the different monarchies that have ruled, all those different kinds of systems, but you always had split allegiances. Nationalism combines all of that to further goals of one particular state. So Christian nationalism, much like Jewish nationalism being Zionism, Christian nationalism forces the identity of who is Christian and makes that the identity of the nation. But when you do that, it's the state, the same as it is in Israel now, it's the state that's determining who is Christian, who is faithful, who is devout. What does that mean? It's not up to the body of people who are believers in God, but by powers who want to control and manipulate and put people in boxes so that they're easier to control. So racism undergirds both of those systems. Racism is the belief that certain people are superior to others, and those are based on biological factors. Excuse me. And I hope that some of us have done some anti-racism work or some study. Anybody out there? Okay, great. It's one of those things that's been really helpful for folks who have done some anti-racism work to then look at the situation in Palestine and the Christian nationalism spreading in our own country, because we don't realize sometimes how much of these government positions, actions, and the pain that we all get to experience together are founded on these racist beliefs. So when you have a system that says, as we discussed this morning, as some scripture is twisted to say, some people are more special and more chosen and more pure and more holy and more valuable because God decided than these people, whoever it is that's making these up. That, in this particular situation of Palestine, has come to be, as I hope y'all have seen in the last couple of years, one of the worst. It's going to be, we're in the middle of it. This is going to be one of the worst things that's recorded in human history. We have had atrocities through every empire and every existence of people on every piece of land that they exist. But the way that we are able to document this, to share that information as it's happening, has never happened before. So it is a unique situation where all of these evils are really coming together and support each other. Excuse me. To lead us to where we are now. So Zionism is both antithetical to democratic and Jewish values. Israel claims to be a Jewish democratic state, but it is a state that has a stratosphere of citizenship. Here in the US, when we think of you becoming a citizen, you may have been born here, but you may have gotten a green card, you may have immigrated, you may have passed the test, you may have done whatever, but a citizen is a citizen. Once you have that, our rights are the same. And we know they're not administered the same here, but technically, legally, they are the same. That's not the case in Israel, and the constitution of the state does not actually define what a Jewish person is. So it's up to the state to decide which type of Jewish person they actually want to be Jewish in terms of Israel. So that was, again, done intentionally as well. So even if you were born there, if you are not Jewish and not the right kind of Jewish, you don't have the same rights and access to resources in Israel. So that's even if you live in Israel and not the West Bank. It's different and divided over there. So that's already an apartheid system where you have different legal codes based on your identity. So saying that Israel is a democratic Jewish state is really a contradiction of what both of those things mean. It also has erased the beautiful diversity and rich Jewish history that has occurred all over the world. So there are Jewish people who have lived in Palestine forever, and would consider themselves a Palestinian Jew, as we often hear Jesus referred to. But once the state of Israel came into existence, those identities were wiped out. You don't anymore get to be a Jewish person and carry on the traditions as validly if you're from Iraq or Iran or Ethiopia. You're supposed to follow white, Western Jewish traditions. So this nationalist view of Judaism is anti-Semitic and racist in a lot of ways towards Jewish people themselves and takes away a lot of their identities. Yeah, I think I covered all that. It's a misrepresentation of Judaism. And there's a lot of dehumanization in this, and this goes with all three of these areas. They build on each other. The nationalist movement in the West that supported Zionism, Jewish Zionism, to settle the state of Israel, was also based on the West's own anti-Semitism. So we get told the story of the founding of Israel as if it is a great redemption for what the Jewish people have experienced, being persecuted throughout history, and post-Holocaust as a safe place for them to go. But the reason that Britain, especially with the Balfour Declaration, with the laws they created during the British Mandate, was supportive of this is not because they actually care about the Jewish people. It comes from a place of their own anti-Semitism, that they wanted those Jewish people to leave their white Western countries and go somewhere else. They didn't want them to be government officials, to own businesses, to influence England, especially in their growth in the modern day and age. So the myth that we are sold that this was done really in support of the Jewish people doesn't hold up when you recognize how deep the anti-Semitism goes. So this racism again comes into this because the way they set up with the support of the US, England, the other Western powers, the way that they set up this nation was to preference, again, white, especially Jewish people who aligned with Western values. This has led to extraordinary dehumanization of Palestinians, and like other times in history when things like this have happened, you hear a lot of comparisons to them as animals. I'll have some quotes to share with you in a minute about that, and has led us to the point of dehumanization that we're all the way to genocide now. Maybe I should say, if you came, I hope you didn't, coming to hear a both sides kind of presentation, that's not what this is going to be. I have been doing these talks for a very long time, and it is important to hear different people's perspectives. But if you were going to do a talk on the existence of slavery in the US, it would not make sense nor be ethical nor just to put an enslaved person on a panel to speak with someone who owns slaves, as if those are two equal opinions, because they are not. That's where we're at with this. We get painted with the anti-Semitism brush because that's the easiest way to discredit justice in this case for all people. So these are some quotes that you get an idea here of some of the times this happens many times. Palestinians have been compared to rats, to snakes, all kinds of things that you think of also being massively exterminated, which repeats a lot of the dehumanization and animalistic language that has been applied towards Jewish people also. So if you give, the Palestinians are like crocodiles. The more you give them, so the more, this is in land negotiations, the more you give them, the more they're going to want. the plan all along here has been to have the Arabs, once this entire apartheid system is in structure, to run around like drugged cockroaches in a bottle. So when we see the conversations, we were just talking earlier about countries now recognizing the state of Palestine, there is no state. I can talk about that in terms of geography, but in a lot of ways that is an impossibility. It's a physical impossibility for what we think of recognizing as a state. And this has always been the plan of this Zionist project supported by the West, to get all of the Jewish people out of wherever other folks didn't want them to be, send them to Palestine, frame it as an empty land. There are people without a land and a land without people that they could go to. The lie, of course, is that there were people there, and there have been Jewish people there as part of those people for the entire time that Judaism has existed. One of the really, I think it's summarizing statements and horrifying, humbling, but Golda Meir said once of this whole situation that when peace comes, because it will eventually, maybe whatever that means, they will be able to perhaps forgive Arabs for killing their children, the Israeli children. But it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their children. Peace will come when Arabs love their children more than they hate us, which again is just an utter falsehood, that you could claim that any parent loves their children any less than another parent. But the idea here is that the Jewish people were forced to do these horrible crimes that we're seeing. And this is still the justification that we're seeing in Gaza now. They had to kill all those people. They had to shut off all the water. They had to shut off all the electricity. They had to stop baby formula from getting in, because that's going to support terrorism. It doesn't, and that's just not how it works. But it's difficult, I think, for folks in the US, especially if we've not done our own anti-racism work and we have not done our own unpacking of our history, to feel like we have some real ground to stand on when it comes to telling somebody else not to behave this way. Because this is the same way that the land that we're on right now was cleared at one point of indigenous people. How many of y'all have seen this painting before? It's called, okay. You might want to look it up sometime so you can really get into the details that are here. You could do a whole class just on this painting. But it's called American Progress by John Gast. And you can see here in the middle we've got Providence, the angel, the very white, blonde angel of Providence, coming west with westward expansion, pushing this dark, primitive life and savages, useless stuff just off this side of the map. They don't need to be there anymore. We're being replaced by progress. Providence herself is running out a telegraph line, so we're so much more civilized and cultured than these people. We didn't call them people. We called them animals as well. But when we haven't really sat with or done our own internal work on recognizing that we're generations now down from doing this exact thing, it's hard to, and I understand, look at somebody else and say, well, you can't do that. Because then what do I do with my life as a white American whose ancestors were settlers themselves? How do I live with that on a day-to-day basis? And what does it mean to care about love and justice and behave that way when I know that I'm a benefactor of this system? So that's part of our own, besides learning all the facts and maps and figures and things of what's going on in Israel-Palestine, one of the number one things that you can do to help Palestinians and others is learn about our own history and learn about some of these things that we take for granted as just the cultured, civilized way to run a country when it is not. We're getting to watch on Instagram and TikTok and everything live play out what happened here before we had the means to document those things. So we can see on our own maps here, as the indigenous land shrunk and shrunk and shrunk until we've ended up with tiny reservations spread out throughout the U.S., and most of that indigenous population wiped out, along with a lot of environmental destruction as well. So this is very much our story, and our politicians and global leaders count on that. They count on us, whether we're Christian or not, believing this narrative. So this is from Mike Pence's speech a few years ago, but still very relevant. He said, in the story of the Jews, we've always seen the story of America. It is the story of an exodus, a journey from persecution to freedom, a story that shows the power of faith and the promise of hope. My country's very first settlers also saw themselves as pilgrims sent by Providence to build a new promised land, which is this picture. Essentially, is his quote. Our government's, our nation's power relies on us buying into this mythology without ever examining it, without ever checking it against our own theological values, and use it to further their own political interests. So if maybe some of you have seen the shrinking map of Palestine, this gives you, and I could do a whole class just on this map, but this gives you very briefly an idea of when you hear about the two-state solution and wanting to get a Palestinian state, when you know what the geography is and what it's like to try to get from one village to another in the West Bank, you know that it's just nonsense to talk about this as if this could ever be an easy solution to the situation. So Palestine, the white parts on the map over here, this is pre the existence of Israel in 1947. There are already Jewish settlements. The Zionist movement had started fundraising and moving Jewish people to Palestine before the state of Israel had been created. And again, like I said, there have always been Jewish people living there. So they've always been part of the history of the land and have lived next door to people of other religions and other identities, as so many folks have moved in and out of the region. This is a region that has been occupied by the Romans, the French, the Greeks, the Ottoman Empire. The languages have changed here. The lines have changed here. The new religions have been invented, and then identities have changed in this same land over all of these years. So it's a very complex and diverse region that we decided we could just draw some lines on and send new people to, and everything would apparently be fine. So the original plan that was proposed was almost a 50-50 split, and the green part would become Palestine, the white part would be Israel, and Jerusalem, this yellow dot in the middle on the second map, would be a neutral capital city for both peoples, and it would be governed and administered by the United Nations. So that plan was what was agreed upon. It never happened. We go straight to the one that did happen, with the West Bank being the larger green shape here, and Gaza is this strip over here by the shore. So already you have the idea of how can these places that are not connected be one state when it's another people that do not have your best interests at heart that is in between. And Israel controls all the movement in this entire region, and even between, when we get to the map in 2005, those green areas have gotten even smaller since. But those are Palestinian villages, with the white parts being taken out by Israeli settlements expanding in the midst of them. So it is Swiss cheese in a way. As Mitri Rahab says, the Israeli settlements get the cheese and they leave the Palestinians with the holes. So even if you want to go this more detailed map down here, if you want to go from the village, the town of Ramallah, which is where the Palestinian Authority has their headquarters. So President of Palestine wants to go from Ramallah down to Bethlehem for a meeting. He still has to go through multiple checkpoints, that are administered by Israeli security forces and private security, and can be stopped at any time. So again, the idea that these are two peoples or even two states, two entities that just don't agree on what the borders are, and they can just fight it out like two other nations equally matched. That's not the case at all. Palestine is not allowed to have an army. They're not allowed to have weapons. They're barely allowed for their government to function. And again, so even the president has less power than an 18-year-old Israeli soldier who's at the checkpoint, who decides, we're closing it and you're not getting through today. And it can be as arbitrary as that. I've been stuck, I'd wait in hours and hours and hours when the road is closed for no reason whatsoever. And this is all within Palestinian territory. What is lifted up internationally as what would be a Palestinian state, should they ever get to do that. So within the West Bank, it is further divided. You can see there's area A, B, and C. A is the only part that is under full Palestinian control, 18%. And that's smaller now. This map is, I think, maybe a year or so old, but the settlements are expanding that fast. Area B are the areas that are right outside these towns of Area A. They're under joint Israeli and Palestinian control. And then Area C, which is most of the West Bank, is under Israeli control. And a lot of that is farmland. So the way that you survive in this environment and the way communities have been built, you have your town, you have some smaller villages, and then you have your farmland. To be a farmer, you need to be able to get to all of that land. So when they build the apartheid wall and separate village from village inside the West Bank, you no longer have access to your olive trees that have been there for hundreds of years, like I was talking about this morning. You no longer have access to your grapes to grow wine and to eat, to make money for your family, to feed everybody. All those kinds of things are all cut off. So this is all, again, by design. This has always been the plan. The whole time that we were being sold the conversation and the debate that there could be two states, we just need to figure out what the borders are. That was never a genuine plan. Gaza itself is its own situation. Before 2 years ago, before October 7th, already it had been under complete siege for over 15 years, and 97% of the water was already contaminated, was undrinkable. Israel counted the number of calories that it allowed into Gaza, so people have been, rates of birth defects have gone up, other diseases, things that are passed down by being malnourished, essentially, and then by all the pollution that's in the environment as left there by Israel. So they control literally everything that comes in and out of Gaza, down to wedding dress material, baby formula, parts of medical equipment. They'll let in the whole thing, but take out like a needle or a closure or something so that the entire thing doesn't work. They deem that a security threat at the border. So folks in Gaza have been in a concentration camp. We used to call it an open-air prison, but I think that implies that there is some guilt, some crime, and a trial that has happened that you've ended up in prison, and that's not the case. So besides the land areas being blocked off with a giant fence, the sea is also patrolled. So even though it is the ocean, there's only a certain distance that they're allowed to go out before they're shot at by Israeli patrol boats. So when we look at what folks are trying to survive today, like there aren't words to convey how horrible and how hopeless it is to just try to cling to life right now. Like I said, I've talked about this stuff for a long time, but the last couple of years, I don't know how to give these talks. at some point anymore, because it is impossible for me to convey how bad things really are. And now that the last couple of years of extraordinary violence have happened and folks are starting to pay attention, we get this told to us as a narrative as if October 7th, this one instance of violence just came out of nowhere. And again, completely false. This has been a pattern of behavior by Israel and by the Western powers that helped create Israel. The US is still sending billions and billions and billions of dollars in military aid and funding to Israel to do all of this destruction and construction of the apartheid system. And you can look at pictures of folks in tents now, people fleeing with their belongings, and if you turn them black and white, they look exactly like they have since 1948, 1947, when massacres started to encourage the Palestinian people to flee from their villages. So the level of dehumanization we have reached towards the Palestinian people is also almost incomprehensible, because we have people that survived, that are still living, that are older than the state of Israel, who are carrying the keys of their homes that they left when they were told by the Zionist militias that they just had to leave for a bit because things were unstable and they could come back home. And they're still in Gaza. A lot of them are not in Gaza because over 500,000 people have been killed there now. So we have people who have living memories of these patterns playing out and still disregard them completely. Part of the goal of this, and why no matter where we try to draw the borders, where we try to curtail settlement expansion, where we try to negotiate with Israel as a nation on their behaviors, it is never going to work, because like I said, the plan was for there never to be another Palestinian state. And the actual plan is for Israel to be even larger than its borders now. You'll start to see, I encourage you all when you're watching the news to watch the lines of the maps. And there's another one I should have put in here that I've started to see be used recently. And it has another little area up at the top of Israel, and that is other occupied territory. They're occupying territory in Lebanon and Syria and bombing all of these countries along with bombing Gaza, because the end goal is to take over completely Jordan, a lot of Syria, all of Lebanon, Iraq, into Egypt and Saudi Arabia. If you were here this morning, we were talking about where some of those Bible characters were from and the wells and all that. And when I said, they said it's Rebecca, Abraham sent a servant to go find a wife for his son Isaac. They give birth to Jacob, who becomes Israel. She's from all the way up here. And that's part of the scriptural basis for where they're saying that the lines of the actual state of Israel, the territory that God has given people, is this large and not just where it is now, because we're just grasping at any history that has happened to expand their control of this region. So we have started to see, you can see a badge here start appearing on uniforms, but watch the maps. I would encourage you to do this with any issue around the world. But maps and where the lines are drawn are what shows you where we really are and where we're going and who's really in control. Okay. So the PCUSA has officially rejected Christian Zionism, first in 2004 and again at our last General Assembly in 2024. All of this is information that I encourage you all to check out and read more about online. But we have wholly condemned this because of its foundations in racism and exclusionary practices. It's not, it's antithetical to how we describe and believe, as Presbyterians specifically, but other denominations too, of God's all-encompassing, expansive love. We don't get to divide out different people, again, for being more special than others, which is what Zionism does. Because the foundation of Christian Zionism specifically is, the goal is to get all of the Jewish people all over the world to move back to Israel. And when that happens, that will trigger the second coming of the Messiah. And the world will end. And all of the real Christian believers will get to go to heaven with Jesus. And all of the Jewish people and everybody else who doesn't recognize that Jesus was the Messiah this whole time can burn in hell for all eternity. So when we see Christian Zionists and the Christian Zionist lobby, which is about the same thing as the Christian nationalist lobby at this point, say that they are supporting settlement expansion, say that they want to send defense, weapons, material, whatever, to Israel, is not because they actually care about them. Again, it's a racist and apocalyptic goal that they have, to use Jewish people to manipulate their own theology to meet Jesus. And I don't think that he's going to have anything nice to say about that. It just doesn't make sense. I put off in doing these talks about Palestine for a long time, addressing Zionism specifically until the last couple of years. And part of it is because it's hard to talk about because it doesn't make sense. So from my perspective as an educator, it's really hard to talk to a group of people and try to make this make sense to people who were not raised with Christian Zionists or with that apocalyptic theology, because you're just like, what? Why? Why would anybody do that? That doesn't make sense, because it doesn't make sense. So we have a long history of this. The PCUS rejected dispensationalism, which is one of the foundation kind of principles to Christian Zionism, all the way back in 1944. So pre-State of Israel, pre these political manifestations of the religion, we already said this kind of division doesn't work. It's antithetical to our theology of one covenant of grace, and that we're all included in that no matter what. Dispensationalism divides people, dispensations, into these different times of interaction with God, and the way that God dispensed the law and God's relationship with the people is supposed to have changed in all of these times. So that's why a lot of Christian Zionists can say the Jews were God's chosen people, but not as chosen as us, because we came later. So the covenant that God made with the Jewish people back here stands, but God made a new one with us, and we're the ones that are really supposed to carry on with things. So there's a lot of wackiness in there we could go into. I want to get to some of the PCUSA policies so I can take some questions here. This, like I said, the sheets out there are a good place to start. They're incomplete. We have a really extensive history on dealing with this, engaging with this issue, and taking both, making both theological stands and calling for specific action that can help. And again, this is all done in partnership with Palestinians, with Israelis, with Muslims, Christians, Jews, everybody here and there. So there are quite a few times we have called for boycotting certain companies, certain products. We have one, there's a boycott campaign against Chevron right now. Do you have Chevron up here? Or is this one of the, okay. This is one where it's like some areas of the country can join in better than others. We don't have it where I live, so I can't boycott them. But the PCUSA already divested from Chevron because of their impact on climate change. But they're also now being boycotted in the US for their complicity in the genocide. So again, this is one of those where if we're consistent with our values and caring for all of God's creation, we end up doing good things for different issues. So I'm a little bit proud of that one. Another example of this is at our last General Assembly, we have not divested yet, but we started an engagement process with Palantir. You may have heard of Palantir recently because they're one of the surveillance companies that is doing a lot of the surveillance and monitoring with ICE to kidnap and arrest and target folks. So all of these systems that we have seen be created to be used on Palestine, perfected on Palestinians, checkpoint monitoring, all of your tech, all of our phones being infiltrated, all of those things that can be used to help control a population have been perfected on Palestinians, and now these companies are marketing them internationally. I just saw this weekend, I got to follow up on this, but DoorDash, food delivery company, has partnered with an Israeli drone company. So we can have our food delivered in our blissful ignorance here in the US by a drone that was designed to kill Palestinians. I want to say kill Palestinian children, but they kill everyone. I saw a video the other day of a drone and a woman in Gaza who still has a bedroom, no windows, all blown out, but the drone had just flown in her room and was just watching her sleep. So lots of folks have been killed by these. They make drones to drop different munitions. They have guns attached to them, all those kinds of things, but also just for surveillance. So these companies that we target, we've gotten a lot of flack for some of them, but it's because these are the things that they're making their money off of. It's not that the technology itself is a terribly unethical thing, but they're doing terribly unethical things with it. And so that's where we have engaged with companies, with Caterpillar, with HP, with Motorola Solutions. We've divested from all of those because in our communications process, they did not change their practices and continue today to still be complicit in these crimes. So there's quite a lot here that we have done that we can talk about. This last General Assembly, we had one of the things that we did that was a first time that now we are in partnership gotten the same goals accomplished as the Methodists. We have divested from Israeli bonds. So these also are not just regular investments. These are investments specifically in bonds for a country. Not company, not private capitalism, nothing like that. It is only to support them in maintaining occupations and things like that. So I think that's all I'll say about that. I want to stop here for any questions. Yeah.
I have a question about land.
Yeah.
In your eloquent and informative sermon this morning, you spoke of using the Samaritan woman at the well and Jacob, who was a Jew, as an example, that the land is God's land. All land is a part of the commonwealth or the kingdom of God. Mm-hmm. And this is a paradox that I'm not pinning on you, but the paradox is in the shrinking land map, mm-hmm. And when we make our case for Palestinian sovereignty that's so tied to the land and its land use, aren't we doing the opposite of that in favor of the Palestinians? Don't get me wrong, genocide is genocide. Mm-hmm. But when we are making the argument and on the basis of Palestinians' God-given right to the land, mm-hmm. and to perpetuate their agriculture and to perpetuate their children and grandchildren, are we not making an exception for them? I have the feeling you have an answer to that.
I do. I'm going to make one up, I think, as I go. But yeah, I think I would say that we don't, because that it's not a contradiction, because in supporting Palestinian people and having equal rights, we are caring for Israelis as well. You can't have, it's not, at this point too, people always try to divide you, are you pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine. If you genuinely care about either one of those people, you should care about both. You can't not care about the other one. There's the story from Solomon, where the women bring the baby to him. There's the two women have a baby. One of them, they wake up, one of the babies is dead. They don't know which baby belonged to which woman. So they go to Solomon and they're like, this is my child, make this crazy lady give me this child. And he says, well, okay, if you both claim it, let me cut it in half. And one of them is like, fine, yes, I will take my half of my dead baby that I apparently care so much about. And the other woman is like, absolutely not. I care about the child, so I want it to stay whole. So the same thing works with these people groups. They are not two completely separate people groups. That's where we need to remember this long history of identity. These are, if we wanted to do genetic testing, a lot of them are related. And they have been in this land together for a long time, and the identity categories that we put them in now are new and made up. So by supporting Palestinian people in having land autonomy, and safety, we're going to provide those things for Israelis and anybody else also. When you're in the position that we are really as the US a lot, and as an Israeli, I'll use specifically an 18-year-old Israeli at a checkpoint. When my whole identity and my future of my careers is based on what relationships I make while I'm in this position, all those kinds of things, but my entire identity is being literally and metaphorically stationed at this checkpoint to control and oppress Palestinians. If that's my job to stand there with my boot on their neck, what kind of freedom do I have? I don't get to go anywhere either. The prison guard is as much in prison as the people they're guarding. So I argue that in this case, in a lot of cases, supporting Palestinians specifically is supporting Israelis. I care just as much about the Israeli people because they're human people as I do about the Palestinians. And we're seeing now, I just saw this last week, Israeli soldiers who are protesting, were in an interview in a government hearing, and they're dumping out their bags of antipsychotic medication that they've been prescribed from coming back from Gaza. So the same thing that I saw happen to my own classmates with PTSD, some have committed suicide, some have been killed by police, when they had breakdowns after coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan for being sent to commit those crimes against other people. Their lives have been destroyed too, and their families and their children. So these Israeli soldiers who thought they were doing what they should do and serve their country and go fight in Gaza and kill the terrorists are already losing their minds because they're coming back to their families and homes in Israel, and all Israel is doing as a government is giving them medications to turn off their brains and turn off their empathy. So as long as I am supporting or letting Israel do that for their own self-interest, I think that would make me a pretty terrible friend. To say I'm really a friend of Israel, that I care about them, and I do, that means stopping them from losing their own humanity. And that's where we're at this point. We've been slowly on this trajectory for a long time, but it's extraordinarily acute when you see young people dumping out bags of medication that they've been given, because we know, the government knows, you can't carry these things out and maintain your humanity, and that's how they're trying to treat it. Are there questions? Yeah.
I think I'm loud enough.
So we are streaming this, so if do you want to repeat the question? Yes.
I love a mic. I love talking, so no problem. So this feels overwhelmingly depressing and sad, and more importantly, hopeless. Not just listening to, but when I listen to NPR, I listen to a lot of NPR, sometimes to the point I gotta turn off NPR. So the burning question is, what can we do? So me personally wanna feed people, right? But then, well, how can I submit money to an organization that's just gonna get their food bombed and stolen by pirates? So, other than just educating ourselves, that feels empty, no offense. What can we really do?
I get it that the learning part feels empty, but you got to keep doing that, and do that part so that you can spread what you learn. Because we are at this point so overly inundated with the amount of opinions and facts, whoever made them up, and knowledge, whoever made them up, on my phone at any point. How do you even Google something to find out where are the borders? You're not going to get the right answer. That's also on purpose. So I think it's becoming more and more important for us to talk to each other, and this is on this issue, but others too. And so for me to be able to say, in my case, I've been there. I've been stuck at this checkpoint. I've had a gun held at me. This is what this feels like. These are the realities that are happening. Whatever government, media agency, whatever, can tell whatever story they want, but when you know me, and I know what's happening there, or a Palestinian, an Israeli, who can tell you what it's like, that's different. So I do encourage us to stick with that. But also, there are a few things that we can do. There are a lot of larger and global and national campaigns going on, products that you can boycott specifically. And I know sometimes that these things feel ineffective because I'm like, well, I'm just one person. It's just my one soda stream that I got, or my, Sabra hummus at this party. But we got to remember that we're not alone in doing it. So check out the BDS network and the page. They've got all the products on there that you can focus on specifically. But that's one of the things that you need to remember, that you're not in this alone, and that you're right. I want to feed people in Gaza. I can't do that just directly necessarily. But there are roundabout ways that you can support that happening. There are also, organizations that are doing their best to still get food to people. There are a couple of colleagues I have in Gaza that, thank God, are still alive, that work for the American Friends Service Committee. And they are still trying to do what they can as they're forced to evacuate themselves. But being a part of the larger economic pressure is one of the number one nonviolent ways that we can support Palestinians now, and Israelis who are trying to end this system. Because, like I've said, none of this is actually based on religion. None of it's based on ethics or on values. Well, it's based on values. It's based on money. They're corporations and they're businesses that are successfully profiting off of absolute misery. And they are not going to change their minds. So taking away their money and their profit is one of the only ways to get them to change behaviors. So these little actions that we can take do make a difference. You have suggestions too on the? Yeah. Do you want to add some?
I've got one I want to make.
Okay. Do you want to say it now?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Don Christensen from McAllister Plymouth United Church in St. Paul. Thank you so much for putting on this forum. Very, very informative today. I appreciate it. I'm on a similar organization in the United Church of Christ as the one that you are on in the Presbyterian Church, so we're colleagues in this work. None of this could be happening in Gaza, in the West Bank, without our government shielding Israel and allowing them, enabling them, helping them to do everything they're doing in Gaza and the West Bank. So that's where our work is. It's to pay attention to put pressure on our representatives in Congress. Every Friday at 11 o'clock, I join a lot of Americans, usually about 160 of us across the country, in the American Friends Service Committee Hour of Action. And we spend the hour together in a Zoom meeting, but calling. I call our two senators and my representative, Betty McCollum, virtually every Friday and give them a message about what we are doing and should be doing in Palestine. Also, we have an election coming up. Remind me of who, you have a new congresswoman in this district, right? Yes. Yeah. What's her position on this issue? Anybody know? My congresswoman is Betty McCollum, and we've been putting pressure on her for years, and she's doing a pretty good job. I pay very close attention to how she votes on every issue related to Israel and Palestine, and I'm constantly in touch with her office about saying thank you or saying you should be doing something different. You need to find out where your congresswoman is. If for example, if she's taking money from a PAC called AIPAC, maybe you could say more about AIPAC, which is the largest pro-Israel source of money and political pressure organization. If she's taking money, a lot of money, from AIPAC, then she's not going to vote for any bill that puts pressure on Israel to do something different, to restrict arms, for example. Find out, does she take AIPAC money? If so, why? Find out, there are bills in Congress to restrict arms to Israel. Does she support those? I don't know. Frankly, I should find out for myself. But I find out where Betty McCollum is on those. So anyway, there's a lot you can do with your congresswoman and our senators.
I can say that
She looked it up.
bill from Kelly yesterday, she's never taken a penny from corporate tax.
Good.
That's good news.
Thank her for that.
I will say I'm a bit, I don't want to say completely hopeless about our U.S. government system, but I also am coming from parts of the world where I have not been represented. My congressman in Indiana was Mike Pence's brother. I am from places where it does not matter. The last Senator Capito's office that I went to speak to her about domestic policy in Charleston, West Virginia, where I live now, she, instead of meeting with people or having a staff person meet, had everyone arrested instead. We are to a point with our government already, you absolutely need to be making phone calls, you need to be a pain in the ass to them as much as you can. But and especially if you're in areas, if you have a chance to have somebody in office who hasn't taken AIPAC money, support them. You should be calling them to say they're doing a good job too, because they always hear from the squeakiest wheel, and that's the folks who want more money sent to Israel. In an interview, in a meeting that I had at the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem a year or so ago with their representative, he said something that will continue to stick with me, and I think has changed some of my framework for how to do this work. We were making our case for the U.S. not being evil, not supporting Israel, and advocating for Palestinians, and he said, governments are not moral entities. And you cannot and should not expect them to behave morally. And I think that, and he wasn't saying this cruelly, this was a nice gentleman that we talked to that extended our meeting to have a better conversation. But the fact remains that he's right. They are not moral entities, and that's not what they're designed to do, and that's not what they're designed to uphold. That is what we as people and as Christians expect them to do. That is often why we vote for particular people. But that is not the framework that our government is working with. So that's where I come back to the economic pressure political pressure, economic pressure, anything that you can do to make it more painful for someone to support genocide than to not is what we need to do. And part of that is using these words: genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing. These things are happening, they're not up for debate. And we get caught up in whatever we hear on TV, and maybe it's not that bad, and well, my friend said, and that hurt somebody's feelings. We're so far past that. So my plea to you all, if you have any city level representatives also, we've tried a city council resolution in Charleston also, and that did not go well. At any level, and these, there are, you may have seen, there were over 200 something members of political leadership organizations from multiple people from every state in the US that just went on a trip to Israel. All paid for, all sponsored, pure propaganda trip. Israel is reaching into our city government, our state government, our national government. They're reaching into colleges to glom onto, especially promising young people of color, to interrupt this narrative that they're racist, because they are. They're like, well, if we indoctrinate young, promising, educated people who we think might end up in politics someday, that's what we want. They have a very long-term plan for all of this, and so any way that we can interrupt that, whether it's an ongoing campaign or something that you come up with, will be extraordinarily helpful. Are there questions? Or
Those workbooks, where can we get them?
Yeah. She was asking the different studies, where can you get them? They are available, I believe actually they're available for free now. You can download them from our website. So if you go to thepjn.org and look at, I think it's under the resources tab, or one of them, they're all available. There are some that are still in print. If you go to I think the PCUSA bookstore might still have some, but we want to make them as accessible as possible. So instead of printing them physically and making folks pay for them, we've put them all online. And Why Palestine Matters and Zionism Unsettled have media resources that go with each chapter too. So video clips, interviews, things that you can watch also. Did you guys?
Here in Minnesota, we have two gosh-awful laws, anti-boycott laws, as a matter of fact. And the details would instruct you that they have to do with the state of Minnesota and its vast number of employees, but also its vast number of vendors, people who do business with the state, from having anything to do with boycotts, divestments, or sanctions, probably boycotts more in line. Minnesota is one of 38 states that have these anti-boycott laws, many of whom are blue states, by the way. I was appalled to see that California is one of them, but also Illinois, Michigan. I said I was going to keep this short, and I will. Phil Benson and I, your fellow Presbyterian, and I serve on Minnesota BDS, and right now we're in a campaign to repeal HF 400, I believe it is, Phil, which is the anti-boycott law that's on the records here in Minnesota. Were you going to correct me on that? Okay. All right. And boy, would we love to have your efforts, because it means working up your courage, contacting your elected officials, state senator, state representative, tell them what you know. So it's important to make sure that you have a fact sheet or something to work with. But another interesting thing we found, based on success that some organizations have discovered, that even if you send email, and I'm not suggesting this as a broad brush solution, but even emails, they fill up the docket on the page's desk at the state capitol or the state office building, so that at some point when the legislator says, What are people feeling strongly about? What do I need to pay attention to? What do I need to make sure I don't ignore at the risk of people feeling like I'm not listening to them? They will, the aid will report back to them. Palestine, Israel is getting the most activity of anything we have. We need to take this repeal effort seriously.
Thank you. That's helpful local context for you all. I really hope that you follow up on that together, because that'll do some good too. It is, unfortunately, that is a reality for a lot of states, and has been a process that the government and Israel supporters have been engaged in for some time. There are some states, I think Texas is one, where you can't get FEMA relief funding if you've been the victim of a natural disaster and have boycotted. You are not eligible. So if your entire house gets wiped out in a flood, a tornado, hurricane, whatever, if you have spoken up for a boycott, technically in that documents that you sign, you're not eligible to receive that funding. And if you sign the document to get the funding, it says that you will not boycott against Israel. And again, this is in all parties. All parties have supported this. I don't have anything good to say about any of them, to be honest. Question back here.
Hi, I'm Anna Kendig-Flores. I'm the anti-racism coordinator for the Presbyterian and the acting co-executive. So it's so great to see many folks from our congregations here today, and thanks to the organizers. Just wondering if you can say a little bit more about the interlocking nature of what's happening in Israel, Palestine. You've been speaking about the money interests, and you started us out thinking about nationalism, Christian nationalism specifically, but then also racism and Zionism. And one thing that I keep thinking about is how can we realize that this is one of like 1,000 important issues that are bombarding us these days? And so how can we think about action that we take in one area as sort of touching on so many other things? So like if we're engaged with anti-racism work, there's ways that it touches on what you're talking about. If we're engaged in pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel, pro-Jewish and Palestinian work in terms of BDS movements or anything else that can stop what's happening there right now, there's ways that it touches on all these other pieces. So can you speak more to that piece about how we can think about what we're already doing in other ways?
Yeah, I'll give you an example to center us on how interconnected some of these struggles are. One of the partnerships is, you can Google the Deadly Exchange, but our US police are trained by Israeli military forces. So a lot of the same tactics that we saw when I went to Ferguson after Mike Brown was killed, that was my first introduction into protesting anti-racism work in a US context, even though that's where I'm from. I'll admit it was easier for me to learn about Palestine and then turn around and look at my own country and go, oh my God. But so when I went to Ferguson, this was when we started to see really on a national scale how militarized our police have become. They were behaving and set up perimeters, moved people, just like, and had similar equipment and armor to walking through checkpoints in Palestine. So when you're engaging in, and it was Palestinians who were the first to tweet advice to US protesters on how to survive and deal with tear gas inhalation and different things like that, because they have so much experience with it. And they're the same weapons. The tear gas is tested on Palestinians. If you go there and get tear gas, there's some different flavors, and they're a little stronger sometimes than the ones we get here, but they're all made in the US. And so all of those systems are very, very intricately connected. So if you're working, for example, on anti-racism work here in the US and on police brutality, you have to know and acknowledge, to be successful at dismantling that system, that it is wrapped up and funded by this same military industrial complex and specific training techniques. So if it's overwhelming sometimes to see how connected these are, But also, if you're just focused on your area, you don't necessarily realize how that area got to be the way that it is. So if we can take enough of a step back to see how intertwined they are, and see which strings have led you to this particular nest, and have an understanding that they're connected, just pulling on whichever part you have access to, and you have agency in. Whatever your particular skills and identity are, is where this is just kind of up to your own discernment a bit, of where you can be helpful at this. But finding one of these threads of oppression and injustice, and just keep pulling on it. But you need to know where the other end is connected and where it's coming from. So I think there are more and more of these instances. Like I said, with the Palantir surveillance technology, there are, in my neighborhood, there is already one of those portable, it's got police lights flashing all the time. It's just a surveillance truck parked there to monitor our neighborhood. So my neighborhood on the east end of Charleston does feel a little like driving past an Israeli checkpoint, even when I go home already. And part of how we have gotten to this place here is that we ignored for a very long time Palestinians, black people in the US, indigenous people in the US saying, hey, this is how they're treating us. Can we not do that? Can we have your help with stopping them from killing us? No, they're not really doing that. It's okay. So we do need, it's overwhelming to see how connected these are, but we need to understand that it is part of intentionally systemic injustice. And also, you get some great allies when you do that work and get connected. And I want to lift up in a hopeful note that working like that intersectionally and across identity and geography lines is one of the only things that sustains me in this work. Some of y'all may have heard the parable of the choir, that a choir can maintain a note indefinitely as long as not everyone is singing at the same time. Somebody needs to drop out, take a breath, that's okay, but the note keeps going. So you drop out, take a breath, somebody else is going to keep going. So taking care of ourselves in the midst of this overwhelming, heart-wrenching catastrophes and injustice we see is leaning into that communal support. And I think that's a unique challenge, I think, for white folks, because we also need to check our own white privilege when we enter these spaces to advocate with and for folks also. Yeah.
So I'm a little bit curious about these boycott laws. Like, how do they know that I'm buying from someone other than Target? Or, and so I don't understand how anybody would know that, to be able to tell that about you. And if you need a good hummus, Baba's hummus here in the Twin Cities, made in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, Lake and it doesn't matter. Baba's is a local Palestinian company they happen to be one of my clients. But they have wonderful hummus, and it's made right here, and they are Palestinian immigrants.
So that always, yes, do that, go local. That's going to be way better hummus than anything you get in the store anyway. The way that they know is all of this surveillance technology. We have invited them in to monitor us with the way we do everything now. So we gave up that right to privacy for our own convenience, and the powers that be now have this entire system ready to use to prosecute people. On a case-by-case basis, it's continuing to be interesting to see how these laws are actually applied, because some of them have been on the books for some years now, and as a denomination that has officially boycotted, divested, are they going to call for sanctions next? we're like, well, how is that? And other denominations have done this as well. So we're like, well, how does that apply to an entire denomination that represents millions of people? We don't know how the U.S. government is going to follow through with any of that. So a lot of that is prep work on their part to have these things in place to be able to prosecute folks, but also as a fear tactic for us to never get this far. But the reason they're not going to make laws against you doing something that doesn't matter to them. So the more laws that they make against these things, the more it tells me this is extraordinarily effective. Because Israel and the U.S., Israel especially, they have special departments that research these things and create propaganda and comment on things online and do all of this work. They're being paid to do all of it against all of us who are doing it voluntarily. We have cost them billions and billions of dollars, and that's one of the things that helps me sleep at night when nothing else does. It's not enough yet, but that's also part of where the massive effect of a boycott is helpful, is in the avoiding prosecution part too. Because it's a lot easier when you just have a person here and a person here and a person here, or entities that are boycotting. When you have everybody doing it, it's a lot harder to pick out and punish one or two people. So this is again where, and this has been true in all justice movements, to make change like this, we have to have the numbers join us in this, because that makes it safer for all of us to do that advocacy work. Yeah, that's it. Should I wrap up? Do we have more thoughts,
Are there any other
questions?
Wonderful. Thank you, Marietta. Let's get going. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the education you have provided us. This presentation is recorded, so you can come back to it. You can share it with others. That's another way, is sharing the resource that we have in Marietta and what she has provided us today. I also cannot be here without thanking Anna and the Presbyterian for helping us facilitate this conversation as well. Thank you. And in case you came here late, are there still stickers and other things in the narthex? So you can take some swag home with you. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful week ahead.
One more thing, maybe two more. So there is some materials out there. There is a campaign that you all can join called Apartheid Free. That could be your yoga group, your church, your book club, anything. You can join that for more information. But one of the hopeful things that I want to lift up that you all could follow, that may or may not really be making it through on U.S. News, is the Global Samud Flotilla. Samud is a steadfastness, is an Arabic word for a form of solidarity. And there are dozens of ships with hundreds of people, supported by thousands more from all over the world, who are sailing to Gaza in their little boats with bottles of water, whatever they can carry. To try to break through the siege, because the governments are not doing it. So it is up to us. We do these talks and we hope somebody's going to give us a solution for the one thing that we can do to fix it. There isn't. You've got to listen to your own heart where God's calling you to act. Some people are called to be on boats right now as civilians, unarmed, risking their lives to take whatever supplies they can carry directly to the shores of Gaza. Boats have already been stopped, already been hit with drones, people have been arrested, and they're going back again. So look out for that and hold those people in prayer. Thank you.
Did make the news for that because Greta Thunberg was one of the ones on the flotilla. So if you've seen that